1986. Wichita, Kansas. The largest piston aircraft factory in the world sits quiet on a Tuesday morning in May. Cessna Aircraft Company has built more airplanes than any manufacturer in history. The Cessna 172 has been in continuous production since 1956. 30 years of the same basic aircraft rolling off the same line, more of them built than any other airplane ever. More Americans learned to fly in a 172 than in any other aircraft ever constructed. On May 28, 1986, Chairman Russell Meyer issued a single statement. Cessna was halting all piston aircraft production, not slowing it, not restructuring it around a smaller workforce, stopping it completely for the first time in the company's 59-year history. The stated reason was not sales, not engineering, not a downturn in the economy. Meyer said it plainly: product liability costs had made it impossible to build affordable airplanes and survive as a business. That decision did not mark the beginning of general aviation's decline. It marked the end of a sequence that had been running for over a decade, a sequence that destroyed the affordable end of American aviation through specific, documented, named decisions. And the sequence did not stop in 1986. A second wave is running right now, and it has nothing to do with product liability. Have you priced a new trainer lately and felt that number could not possibly be correct? Drop what you found in the comments. And subscribe to Sky Ranch. This is the forensic work the industry leaves undone. In 1978, American manufacturers shipped 17,811 general aviation aircraft in a single year. That year, Cessna alone built more than 6,400 Model 172s. The Piper Cherokee rolled off the line at prices under $30,000. The average new piston aircraft cost roughly 2 to 3 times the price of a new car, expensive, but within the reach of a skilled tradesman, a supervisor, a teacher who planned ahead. At peak, over 827,000 certificated pilots held active medical certificates in the United States. Walking into an American airport in 1975 meant choosing between brands, not between used aircraft from 3 decades ago. Pearson, Piper, Beechcraft, Cessna, Mooney, Grumman. All of them building, competing, driving prices toward people who wanted to fly. General aviation was not a luxury market. It was an accessible skill, the way owning a fishing boat or a motorcycle was accessible to anyone who saved and prioritized it. Then a specific mechanism destroyed it. Not the market, not changing consumer preferences, not demographic trends. A specific, documented, quantifiable mechanism that the industry has never had any financial incentive to put in a single paragraph and hand to the pilots it affected most. By 1962, manufacturer liability insurance for general aviation aircraft cost approximately $50 per airplane built. 26 years later, in 1988, that same liability insurance cost $100,000 per airplane, a 2,000-fold increase in 24 years. That figure comes from a Bureau of Labor Statistics report cited in congressional testimony. It is not contested. Industry-wide liability insurance premiums for the 3 leading manufacturers, Cessna, Piper, and Beechcraft, rose from $24 million per year in 1978 to $210 million per year by 1985. 9-fold in 7 years. By 1985, insurance underwriters worldwide had started refusing to write product liability policies for American general aviation manufacturers at any price. The companies had to self-insure the first $25 million of exposure on every lawsuit filed. Cessna later testified that after halting piston production in 1986, the company spent $20 to $25 million per year on litigation costs alone. That figure is not incidental. It was almost exactly equal to what Cessna had spent annually on research and development during the productive years when it was designing the planes that trained a generation of American pilots. The legal system had quietly redirected Cessna's engineering budget to its defense budget, and the planes stopped getting built. The Cessna 152, the Piper Tomahawk, the Beechcraft Skipper, the The three trainer aircraft that introduced most Americans to flight in the 1970s and the 1980s were all pulled from production by the mid-1980s. Not one of them ever returned. By 1994, US manufacturers shipped 928 general aviation aircraft for the entire year, down from 17,811 in 1978. A 95% production collapse in 16 years. More than 100,000 jobs eliminated from the manufacturing base. Congress finally moved. The General Aviation Revitalization Act, GARA, became law on August 17, 1994, signed by President Clinton. GARA created an 18-year statute of repose for manufacturer liability. If the aircraft involved in a lawsuit was older than 18 years at the time of an accident, GARA shielded the manufacturer from most legal exposure. Russell Meyer had been promising for years that if Congress passed something like this, Cessna would return to piston production. Meyer kept his word. Cessna broke ground on a new production facility in Independence, Kansas, in May 1995. The 172 came back in 1996. The 182 followed. The General Accounting Office later estimated that 25,000 new aerospace manufacturing jobs appeared in the years immediately following GARA, exactly the number congressional supporters had projected at the hearings. The industry declared victory. And here is the number the industry does not put in its anniversary press releases. In the years before GARA passed, Meyer publicly stated that within a few years of the law taking effect, Cessna alone would build more than 2,000 piston aircraft per year. By 1999, 5 years after GARA, Cessna had produced fewer than 900 piston singles for the entire year. In 2024, the entire US industry combined delivered 1,772 piston aircraft across all manufacturers. That is less than what Cessna alone was promising to produce 30 years ago. But production count is not the number that exposes the trap. The price is. A 1978 Cessna 172 cost $25,000 when new. Adjusted for inflation to $2,025, that aircraft should cost approximately $115,000 today. The actual list price of a new Cessna 172 Skyhawk in 2025 is $430,000. That gap, $315,000 above what any honest inflation calculation produces, is not the result of better materials or advanced avionics. It is the accumulated overhead of 40 years of liability law, FAA certification cost burden, and supply destruction embedded directly in the price tag. The plane did not become 4 times better. The architecture of the system became 4 times more expensive to survive. In March 1997, Cessna Senior Vice President John Moore testified before the Senate Commerce Committee. He told the committee that despite GARA's passage, Cessna's product liability costs had not decreased. The law had shielded manufacturers from the liability tail on older aircraft. It had not rebuilt the supply chain. It had not restored the pricing structure. It had not returned the trainers. And the affordable end of the market, demolished between 1978 and 1994, never rebuilt. That was the first wave. The second wave is quieter. It does not show up in congressional testimony. It shows up in acquisition press releases. In 2021, a consortium that included Blackstone Group, Global Infrastructure Partners, and Cascade Investment, the vehicle controlled by Bill Gates, paid approximately $4.7 billion for Signature Aviation. Signature Flight Support is the world's largest fixed-base operator network with 350 locations across the globe. The fuel truck at your home airport, the ramp where you park, the T-hangar waiting list you have been on for 2 years. That same year, the private equity firm KKR paid approximately $4.5 billion to acquire 70 Atlantic Aviation FBO locations from Macquarie Infrastructure Holdings. In January 2026, Bain Capital, a third major private equity firm, acquired the APP Jet Center FBO network. The new chief executive appointed to lead APP is Mark Johnstone, the former chief executive officer of Signature Aviation. 3 of the largest private equity firms on Earth entered the FBO sector within 5 years. The Bain Capital press release explained the investment rationale with a phrase that deserves to be read carefully. APP Jet Center, Bain said, operates at attractive, capacity-constrained airports. Capacity-constrained. At 80% of U.S. airports, 2 or fewer fixed-base operators provide all general aviation services. The airport lease contracts that allow a fixed-base operator to operate are finite by law and by land. You cannot build a new airport at an existing location. You cannot manufacture a new ramp. When a private equity firm that paid $4.7 billion for a fixed-base operator network describes those locations as capacity-constrained, it is identifying a pricing mechanism, not a physical limitation. The pilot who parks on that ramp is not a customer in the traditional sense. The pilot is recurring revenue on a fixed-capacity infrastructure asset. That is the language of the acquisition thesis. It is not a suspicion. It is in the press releases those firms published on the day they made the purchases. Was the $9 billion consolidation of fixed-base operator infrastructure responsible for your last fuel bill? The comments are open. Tell me what you're paying per gallon at a consolidated fixed-base operator versus an independent. The same playbook has run in every sector where access infrastructure becomes concentrated. The 2024 Marina Dock Age Annual Survey found that 84% of U.S. marinas reported rising costs in a single year. 70% increased slip fees. 60% raised service rates. That is what happens downstream of a $5.65 billion private equity acquisition of marina infrastructure, which is exactly what Blackstone did in the marine sector through Safe Harbor Marinas in February 2025. Aviation does not yet have a published equivalent survey tracking fixed-base operator fee increases after acquisition. But the financial model that produced a 70% slip fee increase rate in marinas is identical to the model now operating at 350 signature locations and 70 Atlantic locations. The return on $9 billion invested in ramp and fuel infrastructure does not come from holding the line on pricing. It comes from raising it at airports where there is no competitive alternative to turn to. And now the third mechanism is arriving on a deadline. On January 12, 2026, the FAA published its draft transition plan to unleaded aviation gasoline. The target is full elimination of 100-octane low-lead avgas, 100 LL from mainland United States airports by December 31, 2030. Approximately 170,000 piston engine aircraft in the United States currently depend on 100 LL. The concern driving the mandate is real. Lead emissions from aircraft engines represent the last remaining source of leaded fuel combustion in any United States transportation category. The evidence supports the finding. The question the draft plan does not clearly answer is, who pays for the transition, how much, and for which engines? GAMI's G100UL, a drop-in 100-octane unleaded replacement, received FAA approval in 2022. Whether it will be widely distributed, cost-competitive at the pump, and confirmed compatible with every valve seat design in the existing fleet by 2030 remains unresolved in the published draft. One experienced A&P mechanic, responding to coverage of the plan, estimated that aircraft with valve seats designed for leaded fuel may require cylinder head replacements that could cost $20,000 to $30,000 per engine. That figure has not received confirmation as an industry standard from any manufacturer or regulatory body, but it names the shape of the exposure. An owner who bought a used Piper Arrow for $45,000 in 2023 faces a compliance deadline with a bill whose size no regulatory body has formally stated. 4 mechanisms. 4 different decades. 4 different institutions. The liability cost explosion of the 1970s and the 1980s. The GARA's incomplete correction that restored manufacturing at prices ordinary pilots cannot justify. The private equity consolidation of ramp and fuel infrastructure at capacity-constrained airports. And the unleaded fuel mandate arriving on a timeline the industry has not fully costed for the individual owner. The industry answer for why general aviation is expensive has always been the same: market evolution, changing consumer preferences, the cost of innovation, and safety advancement. That answer is incomplete in a way that is not accidental. Every mechanism documented here has a source document, a named institution, a specific date, and a recorded decision. The liability premiums are in GAMA's own commissioned study and confirmed by the Bureau of Labor Statistics. The GARA pricing testimony is in the Senate Commerce Committee record from March 6, 1997. The Blackstone, KKR, and Bain acquisitions are in those firms' own press releases. The FAA's unleaded transition plan is on the FAA's own website, published January 12, 2026. None of this is hidden. What it is a sequence that no one with a financial stake in the outcome has any incentive to compile and present to the pilots it affects most. Now here is what the mechanics who flew through all of it figured out. The FAA cannot require you to buy a new aircraft. The Experimental Amateur Built Category, EAB, exists precisely because Congress understood that certified production would eventually price out the working pilot. The builder who spent 3 years on a Vans RV-7 owns an aircraft that no private equity firm's pricing model can reach. The pilot who keeps a 1979 Piper Cherokee in an independent T-hangar at $150 a month and flies it under Part 91 has a cost structure that the $9 billion consolidation of fixed-base operator infrastructure was not designed to capture. A 1981 Cessna 182 trading between $60,000 and $80,000 on the used market was built during the era when American manufacturers were competing on quality at accessible prices. The fiberglass and aluminum in that airframe is not inferior to what comes off the current production line. The airframe has 40 years of documented failure modes in the NTSB record. The AD compliance history is in the logbooks, available for any mechanic to read before you write the check. The median cost of a private pilot certificate in 2025 was $16,000, according to Redbird Flight's annual survey. After a 16% per year average increase from 2020 to 2023, that figure has stabilized. But $16,000 to learn in a rental aircraft, followed by a $430,000 price tag on the new trainer you cannot afford to buy, is not a market serving the working pilot. It is a market serving the institution. The pilot who understands the architecture of the trap is the only pilot positioned to navigate around it. Which part hit you hardest? The liability wall that killed the trainers, or the $9 billion that took the ramp? Subscribe to Sky Ranch for the analysis. The industry leaves undone.